Have you ever wondered what really happens in the very first moments after death? The instant your soul separates from your body? Imagine this. You're floating above, fully conscious, fully aware, and yet staring down at a motionless version of yourself. Has this ever happened to you in a dream, where you could see yourself but couldn't quite understand how? What you're about to discover might surprise you, because it isn't just theory. It comes from the astonishing, documented readings of Edgar Cayce, the man they called the Sleeping Prophet. But before we begin, please hit the like button and let me know where in the world you're watching from today. It's always fascinating seeing who's joining us from around the world. In 1936, a grieving mother from Virginia Beach sat before Cayce, desperate for answers about her son who had died suddenly. Her heart was breaking, her mind overwhelmed with the same haunting questions that so many of us carry. Where is he now? Can he still see? Me? Does he know how much I love him? What Cayce revealed that day was unlike anything she had ever heard, and it would forever change the way she understood life, death, and the mysterious journey of the soul. He told her, without hesitation, that her son was right there in the room standing beside his own casket. He wasn't gone in the way we think of as gone. In fact, in those first moments after passing, he didn't even realize he had died. He believed he could still wake up, that any second he might slip back into his body and continue as before. And so for 3 long days, he tried again and again to re-enter that lifeless form, to reconnect with the familiar heartbeat, the breath, the warmth, only to find his hands passing straight through. Imagine the shock of that realization. You can see your loved ones. You can hear every word they speak. You can feel their grief as if it's your own. But they can't see you, can't hear you, can't even sense that you're there. This was the boy's reality. He stood by his mother, watching her cry, desperately trying to touch her shoulder, to let her know he was okay, that he was still him. And yet, all his efforts vanished into silence, like a voice calling out in an endless empty room. Cayce explained that in those first hours and days after death, the spirit is often in a state of profound confusion. It knows something has changed, something irreversible. But the connection to the physical world is still so strong that letting go feels almost impossible. And here's the part that might stay with you. During this period, the spirit perceives the physical world with an almost heightened clarity. Colors seem sharper. Sounds are more distinct. Emotions, both theirs and those of the living, cut deeper than ever before. It's in this fragile space, between holding on and moving forward, that some souls face their first great choice. Will they accept the truth and begin the journey toward the light? Or will they remain earthbound, lingering near the life they once knew? This moment, Cayce said, shapes the path of the soul in ways we can barely begin to comprehend. Stay with me until the end, because what comes next will open a doorway into the unseen, where the rules of time, space, and communication no longer follow what we've been taught. In the next part, we'll explore exactly what Cayce discovered about this liminal stage, the reason some spirits linger, the signs they leave behind, and how the living can sometimes reach across that invisible divide. The truth may be stranger, and far more comforting, than you ever imagined. If you enjoy exploring these ideas together, subscribing will make sure you're here for the next chapter of the journey. For 3 long days, the boy's spirit clung to the hope that he could slip back into the body that had once been his home. Each attempt felt real in the moment, reaching for the familiar rhythm of a heartbeat, willing his chest to rise with breath. But each time his hands met only emptiness, like trying to hold water that slipped through his fingers. It wasn't just stubbornness, it was the deep instinctive pull to remain connected to what he'd always known. Imagine the mindset shift this demands, from believing you are still part of the physical world to realizing you've crossed into a completely different state of being. During those days, nothing escaped his awareness. He could hear the whispers of relatives gathered in the next room, the sound of footsteps on wooden floors, the quiet rustle of clothes being chosen for his final rest. He saw the trembling in his mother's hands as she touched his face one last time, the way her shoulders curved inward under the weight of grief. And though every fiber of him wanted to reach out, to wipe away her tears, the barrier between them was absolute. Her world moved on in measured steps, and he stood just beyond its reach. There is something almost cinematic about the way spirits perceive the living world. It's not blurred or distant, it's more vivid than ever. The edges of objects seem sharper, colors richer, and the smallest movements take on a strange significance. A flicker of a candle, a hand lingering on the lid of a casket, a sigh from someone who thought no one could hear. In this state, emotion doesn't just register, it floods. Joy, sorrow, longing, regret, all amplified, all impossible to escape. And here is the hidden truth that carries such impact. Spirits not only see the events unfolding around them, they feel the energy behind them. A touch of comfort meant for someone else can radiate toward them, even if the living are unaware. A harsh word spoken in anger can cut deeper than steel. In those moments, the boy wasn't simply a passive observer. He was absorbing the emotional climate of the room as if every thought and feeling was a tangible presence. This is why funeral moments, though often viewed as closure for the living, can be a turning point for the departed. They stand in the space between worlds, witnessing the transformation of their identity, from someone present and tangible to someone remembered and spoken of in past tense. And the decisions made by the living, the way they speak, the memories they choose to share, the love or resentment they carry, shape the final impressions the spirit takes with them into the next stage of their journey. Even the smallest details of these rituals carry weight. The choice of flowers, the arrangement of photographs, the tone of the voices in the room, each becomes part of the spirit's last tapestry of earthly experience. This is the behind-the-scenes reality we rarely think about, that our actions in those moments are not only for the comfort of the living, but can profoundly influence the emotional state of the one who has just crossed over. Now, I want to go even deeper into this topic, into the reasons some spirits linger, the mindset shifts they resist, and the revelations they face when they realize the world they knew is still moving without them. These moments hold the key to understanding why some souls pass peacefully into the light, while others remain tethered to the places and people they loved most. What Cayce uncovered about those first moments beyond life's threshold doesn't just add a few poetic details to our idea of death, it transforms it entirely. We're used to thinking of death as an instant cut, a single irreversible moment after which nothing of us remains here. But his accounts paint a different picture, one where consciousness doesn't simply vanish but lingers, still tethered to the familiar surroundings of the physical world. This is not the cold, sterile departure we've been taught to expect. It's a deeply human, profoundly intimate stage of the soul's journey, charged with emotion and meaning. In 1934, a wealthy businessman traveled to Virginia Beach, carrying a question heavy enough to pull him across state lines. What truly happens the moment a soul leaves the body? His father had died suddenly, leaving behind a silence that felt unnatural, almost unfinished. In that trance-lit room, Cayce answered him with a revelation that shook even those who had heard hundreds of his readings. The soul, he said, doesn't rush off into some distant light right away. Instead, it hovers close, sometimes for 3 days, sometimes for as long as a week, caught in a strange limbo where the pull of two realities competes for its attention. During this time, the spirit is in a state of heightened perception but clouded understanding. Imagine walking through your own home exactly as it is, hearing voices, smelling the coffee brewing in the kitchen, feeling the sunlight on your skin, yet realizing that no one notices you, no one answers when you speak, no one moves when you reach to touch them. It's a sensory richness paired with a profound disconnection, a hidden truth that changes everything about how we picture the immediate afterlife. The lingering itself isn't random. It's fueled by attachments, decisions left unfinished, emotions that haven't found their resolution. The soul's mindset in those days can swing wildly, from denial to yearning, from peace to frustration. Some remain close to watch over loved ones, afraid to step too far from what's familiar. Others circle their own body, compelled by an almost magnetic need to reconcile the image before them with the feeling of still being entirely themselves. And here's where the impact deepens. Those first days set the tone for what follows. Just as the first minutes after waking from a dream can shape your mood for the rest of the day, The first days after death can influence the direction of the soul's entire afterlife journey. In that space, the living world is more than just a memory. It's still an environment the spirit can see in vivid detail, but can no longer change. The flowers placed by the bedside, the words whispered in grief, the way the body is treated, all of it leaves an imprint. Behind the scenes, beyond what our eyes can measure, these moments are part of a greater transformation, a crossing from one form of existence to another. Cayce described it as a period of orientation, like stepping into a new country without a map, where every choice becomes a guidepost. The decision to let go or to hold on isn't just about comfort, it's about alignment, about whether the spirit will move forward into expanded awareness or remain looping through the echoes of a life already finished. Now, I want to go even deeper into this topic, because understanding why some spirits navigate this transition smoothly, while others become caught in it, reveals far more than we might expect. It's a glimpse into the unseen architecture of our consciousness, and it shows just how much of the journey is shaped before the moment of death ever arrives. In those first suspended days, the world doesn't fade for the spirit, it sharpens. Every detail of the physical realm appears with a precision that borders on overwhelming. The light through a window isn't just sunlight anymore. It's a cascade of golden threads you can almost feel. The sound of someone breathing in the next room isn't background noise. It's a rhythm that seems to echo inside your own awareness. This clarity isn't just visual or auditory. It's emotional. Every flicker of joy, every tremor of grief in the living is experienced with an intensity that would be unbearable in a human body. Yet for all this vividness, there's an ache woven through the experience, the ache of complete isolation. The spirit calls out, not with a voice, but with pure thought, sending waves of intention toward the people it loves, and nothing comes back. No glance in its direction, no answer to its silent plea. It's like being trapped behind glass. You can see and hear the world you've known, but no matter how urgently you try, you can't break through. That disconnection is the first deep fracture in the spirit's new reality. The moment when the hidden truth settles in, the living cannot meet you where you are anymore. This is where Cayce described what he called the first spiritual crisis. It isn't a crisis of survival, the soul is already beyond that, but a crisis of decision. In that suspended state, there's a pull in two directions. One is toward the familiar, the room still filled with your scent, the faces you've loved, the stories you weren't finished living. The other is toward the unknown, a light that isn't the light of the sun, a space that feels like home even though you've never been there in this form. And here, mindset is everything. A spirit still clinging to earthly ties may hover endlessly, looping through memories and moments that no longer belong to them. A spirit ready to surrender to the journey ahead begins to move toward that expanding horizon. Join me by subscribing, so the next time we uncover something powerful, you'll be right here with us. The impact of this choice is greater than we can imagine. To remain earthbound isn't simply to linger, it is to live in the shadow of life, watching without touching, yearning without fulfillment. But to step toward the light is to begin a transformation, a shedding of the weight of time, space, and the limitations that once defined you. It's not a leap taken blindly. It's a conscious decision, a deep recognition that what lies ahead might hold more than anything left behind. Behind the scenes of this invisible threshold, countless spirits face this decision every single day. Some make it quickly, propelled by love that draws them upward. Others hesitate, bound by regrets, promises, or the fear of what comes next. And in that hesitation lies the risk of becoming caught, not in a place of punishment, but in a place of unfinished stories. This is why Cayce's revelations matter so much. They show us that the journey beyond death is not just about release, but about awareness. The more a soul understands this moment before it arrives, the more gracefully it can navigate the crossing. Now, I want to go even deeper into this topic because the forces that influence this choice, and the experiences that follow it, reveal more than just the mechanics of the afterlife. They show us the very architecture of consciousness, the unseen laws shaping our passage from one reality to the next. Cayce once spoke of a man whose story defied the very Rhythm of time. He had died suddenly in a train accident, his final moments so abrupt and disorienting that he never truly accepted what had happened. Instead of moving forward, his spirit remained anchored to the scene, to the shock, to the belief that he still belonged to the physical world. And so he lingered, not for days or months, but for over 50 years. Decades passed, yet for him, the moment of impact never really ended. From his vantage point, he watched as the world reshaped itself. Around him, the familiar sound of horse-drawn carriages gave way to the hum of engines. Streets once lit by gas lamps glowed under electric lights. Buildings rose where open fields had been. Generations of faces came and went. But for the spirit, it was as though he were standing in a photograph that never changed, surrounded by a world that refused to wait for him. It's a haunting image. Life flowing like a river while you remain caught in an eddy, circling endlessly in the same patch of water. This was more than nostalgia or longing. Cayce explained that such spirits often become bound to the living through subtle, unseen connections. They are drawn to people whose emotional state mirrors their own unresolved feelings: grief, anger, loneliness, regret. These emotional frequencies act like magnets, pulling the spirit toward those who unknowingly carry a similar resonance. It's not malicious in intention, but it can have a profound impact. The spirit experiences life vicariously, through that living person, sensing their thoughts, their moods, even their physical sensations in a muted way. This hidden truth reveals just how intertwined our realities can be. While most people go about their lives unaware, there may be influences moving quietly behind the scenes, not as ghosts out to frighten, but as presences trying to relive something they can't let go of. In some cases, this attachment can feel like a gentle pull, a shadow of emotion that isn't entirely yours. In others, it can grow heavier, influencing decisions, sapping energy, or amplifying certain thoughts without an obvious cause. Cayce's perspective reframes this entirely. He didn't see it as a supernatural invasion, but as a symptom of a soul in crisis, unable to make the transition it was meant to. And in that understanding lies the possibility of transformation, for both the living and the departed. For the spirit, recognizing the pattern is the first step toward release. For the living, becoming aware of these subtle connections offers the chance to shift their own mindset, and in turn, loosen the grip of whatever unseen thread has tied them to another's unfinished journey. Now, I want to go even deeper into this topic, because the way these attachments form and the reasons they persist open a doorway to understanding the mechanics of emotional resonance between souls. A resonance that does not dissolve with death, but can shape the journey of both sides in profound ways. Cayce's vision of life beyond life shatters one of the most deeply rooted assumptions in modern thinking, that consciousness is produced by the brain. He described awareness not as a byproduct of neurons firing, but as something far greater, something independent of the body entirely. Our true seat of awareness, he said, is the soul body, an energetic counterpart so precise in its design that it mirrors every contour, every feature, every detail of the physical form. This isn't a vague cloud of spirit drifting without shape. It's a fully realized duplicate, carrying the blueprint of who we are in ways science has barely begun to imagine. Within this soul body lives the entirety of our essence. Every memory, every habit, every instinct we think of as us is housed there. The personality quirks that make you laugh, the lessons you've learned through joy and pain, the patterns of thought that guide your decisions, they are all encoded in this energetic form. It's the ultimate, behind-the-scenes record of your journey, and it doesn't dissolve when the heart stops beating. This is why, in those first moments after death, the spirit feels entirely normal. There's no dimming of thought, no fading of self. The mind works as it always has, perhaps even more clearly. The body may lie motionless, but the awareness inside the soul body is vivid, alert, and intact, and that's where the shock sets in. Imagine standing in a familiar room, feeling your feet on the floor, breathing deeply, only to look across the space and see yourself lying there, pale and still. That image collides violently with the experience of feeling alive, creating a jarring cognitive dissonance that the spirit must somehow reconcile. Hit subscribe, and let's keep walking this path side by side, one discovery at a time. Cayce likened it to stepping out of a vehicle you've been driving for years. The car is still there, perhaps dented, perhaps perfectly intact, but you are no longer inside it. You can see it, even touch it, but it no longer responds to you. For many, this moment is a turning point in the journey. Some grasp the truth quickly and begin to orient themselves toward the new reality. Others, anchored by the belief that the body is the self, struggle to accept what has happened. The hidden truth here is that the shock isn't rooted in fear of the unknown, but in the mind's resistance to the loss of its anchor. The physical body has been the reference point for every decision, every movement, every experience. To realize that you are still you without it requires a radical shift in mindset, a transformation so profound it can either liberate or trap the spirit, depending on how it is met. This is where awareness before death becomes so impactful. Understanding that consciousness exists beyond the brain prepares the soul for that moment of separation. It softens the shock, turning it from a collision into a transition. It's a decision point where the spirit can either cling to the illusion of life as it was, or embrace the journey into life as it now is. Now, I want to go even deeper into this topic because what happens to perception, emotion, and memory in the hours after that realization reveals far more about the nature of our existence than most of us dare to consider while we're still here. One of the most striking revelations from Cayce's accounts is how, after death, the world doesn't dim, it intensifies. Colors appear almost impossibly vivid, as though every leaf, every shadow, every glint of light has been infused with a richness the physical eyes could never fully register. Thoughts flow faster, not weighed down by the brain's limits, and emotions come in powerful waves, unfiltered and absolute. Joy feels boundless. Sorrow cuts with an almost unbearable sharpness. The senses expand, but so does the capacity to feel, and in that expansion, every detail becomes inescapably real. This was never more evident than in the case of the Richmond widow who came to Cayce in 1935. Her husband had died suddenly of a heart attack, leaving her lost in a silence that felt endless. She sought comfort, maybe a fragment of understanding, but what happened during that session went far beyond anything she had imagined. As Cayce entered his trance state, the man's spirit didn't come through an intermediary, as was common in such readings. He came directly, urgently, speaking as though the boundary between his world and hers had dissolved. Through Cayce's voice, he described watching her in the moments she found his body. He was right beside her, desperate to tell her he was safe, that death was not the end they had feared. He tried to wrap her in reassurance, to send the warmth of his presence into her awareness, but it was like shouting into a storm that could not be stilled. She couldn't hear him. She couldn't see him. And that helplessness carried a weight far heavier than the fact of his own death. The energy in the room shifted as the reading unfolded. Cayce, who had delivered thousands of messages, found himself overtaken by the raw, unfiltered grief of the man speaking through him. The stenographer noted that tears streamed down Cayce's face, an unusual break in the measured calm that usually defined his sessions. It was as if the emotional current passing through him was too strong to contain, a living testament to the depth of the bonds that stretch beyond physical existence. Moments like these reveal a hidden truth about the afterlife journey. Heightened perception isn't just a gift, it can also be a burden. To see your loved ones in such detail, to sense their grief amplified by your own inability to reach them, is a trial of its own. This is why Cayce stressed the importance of emotional preparation, not only for those who are passing, but for those who will remain. Our state of mind and heart at the moment of separation can ripple into the unseen, shaping the experience on both sides. Now, I want to go even deeper into this topic, because understanding how these heightened perceptions influence a spirit's decisions in the days immediately after death opens a doorway into the mechanics of connection itself, and why some bonds refuse to break, even in the face of eternity. Cayce often described the first days after death as a kind of crossroads, a period so pivotal that it can determine the entire trajectory of the soul's journey. It's not a passive drift into whatever comes next, It's an active, though sometimes unconscious, shaping of one's path. In those early hours and days, every perception, every decision, every lingering attachment matters. This is when the soul begins to either expand into its new reality or resist it, holding on to the weight of what has already ended. For those who find acceptance, the transition can be astonishingly fluid. Once the initial shock fades and the truth settles in, that life continues, that consciousness is intact, a different kind of movement begins. It's not physical motion but a pull toward a realm Cayce called the first heaven. Here, the environment is tuned for orientation and preparation. It's a place of gentle introduction to the spiritual landscape, where the soul learns to navigate without a body, to communicate through thought and emotion, and to understand the subtle laws that shape existence beyond the material. In this space, the journey feels like a continuation rather than an ending, and a deeper purpose starts to reveal itself. But acceptance is not the path for everyone. Some spirits remain caught between the world they knew and the one they've yet to embrace. Cayce referred to this as the borderland, a gray, suspended state where the familiar still feels closer than the unknown. Time here is deceptive. What might be days for the living can feel like hours to the spirit, or what feels like moments may be years in our world. This distortion adds to the confusion, making it harder to recognize the need to move forward. If this spoke to you, subscribing is the easiest way to keep the conversation going. In the borderland, the soul sees the physical world with the same crystal clarity as before, but without the ability to alter anything. Loved ones' lives continue, houses change hands, the seasons turn, and the spirit remains in place, tethered by unfinished business, guilt, deep longing, or even the simple refusal to release identity. It's not punishment, it's a choice, even if that choice isn't fully conscious. And in that choice lies the hidden truth. The longer a soul lingers here, the harder it becomes to step away. What makes this period so impactful is that it mirrors the emotional and spiritual state cultivated during life. A soul accustomed to reflection, openness, and trust tends to adapt quickly, stepping into the first heaven with curiosity. A soul bound tightly to control, resentment, or fear finds the pull toward the borderland stronger. It's the ultimate reflection of mindset, a magnified continuation of patterns that began long before the final breath. Now, I want to go even deeper into this topic, because the forces that influence whether a soul rises into the first heaven or remains in the borderland tell us more about the continuity between life and death than any abstract theory could. These forces show that the journey is not only about where we go when we die, but about the inner architecture we've been building all along. 1. Of the most curious aspects of the after-death state that Cayce described is the way time itself bends and warps. For the spirit, there is no ticking clock, no sun to mark the hours, no calendar to count the days. Moments can stretch into what feels like eternities, or entire years in our world can pass in what seems like an instant to them. This distortion can be comforting for some, softening the sense of loss, but for others, it deepens the confusion. Imagine standing in a place where cause and effect no longer follow the patterns you've always known. The familiar rhythm of life has vanished, replaced by a fluid, unmeasured flow where it's easy to lose your sense of orientation. This is one of the reasons some spirits linger longer than they might have intended. Without the anchor of time, the urgency to move forward can fade, replaced by a kind of stillness that feels safe but keeps them from truly progressing. And yet, Cayce's readings offered a powerful hidden truth here. The living can play a direct role in helping the departed cross this threshold. We are not as disconnected from them as we think. Through prayer, focused meditation, and intentional spiritual contact, it is possible to create what Cayce called spiritual bridges. These are not physical constructs, of course, but energetic pathways formed through thought, emotion, and intent. They function almost like beacons in the fog, giving the spirit a clear direction and a sense of being acknowledged. When the living direct thoughts of reassurance, love, and release toward the departed, those messages reach beyond the physical barrier. For a spirit lost in the timelessness of transition, that connection can be a turning point. These bridges are not about summoning or forcing a presence to respond. They are about offering a steady, compassionate signal that says, "You are seen, you are loved, it's safe to go." Cayce documented instances where these focused efforts brought a rapid transformation in the spirit state of mind. The awareness that someone in the living world was consciously sending them guidance created a sense of orientation, a reminder that the journey was not solitary. Behind the scenes, this process works because consciousness is not bound by physical location. Thought is a form of energy, and energy travels along the lines of intention. The moment we direct our awareness toward someone, living or departed, we create a connection that exists outside the constraints of time and space. In the stillness of their reality, that connection can appear like a sudden burst of light. Now, I want to go even deeper into this topic because understanding how these bridges are built and why they matter opens the door to a greater revelation about the nature of interaction between realms. It shows us that even in the space between worlds, love remains the most reliable guide, and intention, the most powerful tool we have. Cayce told of a mother whose grief was so deep that it could have bound her son's spirit to the earth indefinitely. Yet, instead of clinging to her loss, she made a conscious decision to help him move forward. She followed the methods Cayce described, sending him thoughts of love without desperation, speaking to him as if he could hear, and affirming that it was safe for him to go. These weren't empty gestures. They were focused acts of intention, forming a clear spiritual bridge between them. And then, something shifted. Her son recognized his new state and crossed fully into the spiritual realm. But that wasn't the end of their story. Cayce later confirmed that he had become a guide for other souls, using his own journey as a way to light the path for those still caught in confusion. This transformation, from one needing guidance to one offering it, reflects the remarkable growth possible beyond the veil. Once free of earthly constraints, spirits who enter higher realms gain access to knowledge that far surpasses what they could comprehend in life. Cayce often spoke of the Akashic records, describing them as a vast, living archive of every thought, action, and event across all time. To a spirit in these elevated states, this is not an abstract concept but a direct experience. They can immerse themselves in any moment of history, understand the roots of universal laws, and see the intricate threads that connect all souls. The impact of such awareness is profound. It changes the way they perceive not only their own existence, but the lives of those still in the physical world. And with that perspective comes a natural impulse to guide, to teach, to assist. Cayce described how evolved spirits often reach back across the divide, making contact through dreams, sudden insights, or moments of deep intuition. These aren't random flashes of inspiration. They are intentional transmissions, small nudges meant to align us with choices that lead toward growth and understanding. What's fascinating is that this guidance rarely feels intrusive. It comes as a quiet suggestion, an unexpected idea, a sense of calm in the middle of uncertainty. The living may not recognize the source, but the influence shapes decisions and perspectives in subtle yet life-changing ways. Behind the scenes, these connections are built on the same principles as the bridges we create for those in transition: love, openness, and intention. The difference is that these advanced spirits no longer need our help to navigate. They have already moved into the role of navigator. Now, I want to go even deeper into this topic, because exploring how these spirits choose when and how to reach out, and how we can recognize their influence in our own lives, reveals a hidden truth about the ongoing relationship between the physical and spiritual worlds, one that continues to shape our journey long after death has changed its form. Cayce's insights made it clear that the afterlife isn't some detached realm where everything that came before is erased. It is, instead, the continuation of a pattern we've been weaving every day we've been alive. The decisions we make now, the way we treat others, the thoughts we nurture in private, all of it is laying the groundwork for what we will encounter in those first moments after we leave the body. This is not a matter of reward or punishment. It is simply the natural echo of our own inner state. A life lived with openness, empathy, and curiosity builds a foundation of readiness. A life spent in fear, resentment, or numb routine can create resistance that lingers long after the heartbeat has stopped. For those who cultivate spiritual awareness while still here, the transition is often described as seamless, a gentle shift rather than a wrenching separation. These souls step into the next stage not with confusion, but with recognition. They understand the transformation because they have, in a sense, practiced it through meditation, contemplation, or simply the mindful act of letting go during life. The joy they feel is not the relief of escaping the physical, but the exhilaration of expanding into a reality they've sensed all along. Become part of this growing space. Subscribe so you never miss the next step forward. And it's often these souls, the ones who move through the crossing with clarity, who choose to return in a new role. They become guides, not in some abstract, ceremonial way, but as active participants in the journeys of others. Cayce described them as way showers, meeting those newly departed in that first disorienting space, helping them recognize the light, dissolving fear with reassurance, and showing them how to navigate the terrain of consciousness without a body. Their presence can be the difference between lingering in confusion and moving swiftly toward growth. The hidden truth is that the choice to guide is itself a continuation of their life's purpose. If they were teachers, healers, or compassionate companions in life, that impulse doesn't dissolve, it magnifies. Freed from the limitations of the physical form, their capacity to assist grows. They can be in many places at once, offering comfort to a grieving spouse, while also reaching out to a stranger halfway across the world who has just stepped into the afterlife for the first time. This behind-the-scenes work of spirit guides is almost invisible to the living, yet its impact is profound. A sudden feeling of peace in the midst of despair, an unexplainable clarity about a difficult decision, a dream that feels more like a meeting than a memory. These may be the subtle fingerprints of a guide who knows your path and cares enough to walk it with you, even if you cannot see them. Now, I want to go even deeper into this topic because exploring how our present mindset influences not only our own transition, but also our potential to serve in the afterlife reveals a larger, interconnected design, one that suggests our journey doesn't just continue after death. It expands into something far more intricate and purposeful than we've been taught to imagine. One of the most moving aspects of Cayce's descriptions was the way he spoke of soul reunions. In these encounters, there are no awkward silences, no lingering resentments, no shadows from past misunderstandings. The connection is immediate, total, and pure, as if every barrier that once stood between you and the other soul has simply dissolved. It's not the limited affection we experience in the physical world, where love is often tangled with expectation or fear. Here, love exists in its raw, undiluted form, recognized instantly by both souls as something eternal. The joy of these reunions isn't just in seeing someone again. It's in remembering at the deepest level that you were never truly apart. What makes this even more profound is Cayce's assertion that love bonds are not severed by death. They remain active, vibrant, and capable of influencing the living. Your grandmother's gentle protection, a friend's sudden encouragement during a difficult time, a partner's unseen presence in moments of danger. These aren't simply the products of memory. According to Cayce, these are genuine interactions, part of an ongoing exchange between realms. The people you've loved most may still walk beside you, not as shadows clinging to the past, but as active participants in your journey, guiding and protecting in ways that defy the limits of the physical. This continuity is part of a much larger hidden truth. We are not temporary beings hoping for some form of immortality. We are immortal souls temporarily living in physical form. Death is not a collapse into nothingness, but a return, a remembering of our natural state, one where the boundaries of the body no longer confine us. The expanded awareness that comes with this shift changes everything. The fears that seemed so large in life, the divisions that kept us apart, the sense of limitation that defined our days, all of it falls away in the light of that recognition. And yet that expanded state is not some distant abstraction. It is as real and immediate as this breath you're taking now. The journey of the soul is a continuum, not a break. What we call death is simply the moment when we set down the physical tools we've been using and realize we are still ourselves, only more so. With the body gone, the distractions fall away, and what remains is the essence, the love we've given, the wisdom we've gained, the connections we've nurtured. Now, I want to go even deeper into this topic, because understanding how this expanded awareness shapes the soul's next steps, and how those still in the physical can sense and even interact with it, opens the door to a far greater comprehension of what it means to truly live as an eternal being. If we think of physical life as a classroom, as Cayce so often described it, then every challenge, every relationship, every moment of growth is part of a curriculum designed to prepare us for that final exam, the moment of transition. In this light, death is not an ending, but graduation day. It is the point at which we step out of the familiar structure and into a larger reality where the lessons we've gathered are put into practice. Some souls move through this passage with ease, carrying with them the wisdom they've cultivated. Others discover, often to their own surprise, that they are not quite ready to leave the familiar behind. One of the most fascinating and perhaps controversial aspects of Cayce's revelations is the idea that in certain cases, the soul can choose to return to its body even after death has occurred. This is not the near-death experience we read about, where revival comes before the final separation. This is something far rarer, a conscious decision to re-enter the physical form after having already crossed into the first stages of the afterlife. Cayce spoke of cases where the pull of love, responsibility, or unfinished purpose was so strong that the spirit reversed its course. In these moments, the journey toward the light halts, and the soul turns back, slipping into the body as though sliding into a garment it had just set aside. Such returns are not made lightly. The decision carries weight because the soul, having glimpsed a broader reality, understands the cost of stepping back into limitation, and yet for some, the impact they can make by staying outweighs the draw of what lies ahead. It is a choice shaped by love, by duty, and by the deep awareness that their presence in the physical world still matters in ways only they can fulfill. But for those who do not return, there are other challenges in the early stages of departure, some of them unexpected. Cayce recounted the unsettling phenomenon of spirits feeling phantom sensations when witnessing their own burial or cremation. The soul is no longer bound to the body, and yet the identification with it can remain so strong that seeing it handled, lowered into the ground, or consumed by flames stirs sensations that feel real. This is not physical pain in the human sense, but a deep, disorienting echo in consciousness, as though part of the self is still linked to the vessel it once inhabited. Here lies a hidden truth with profound impact. The way we speak to and about the departed during these rituals can ease that disconnection. Words of reassurance, expressions of gratitude, and affirmations of love act like threads gently loosening the spirit's remaining ties to its physical form. Cayce urged families to speak directly to the departed at funerals, not as a symbolic gesture, but as a genuine communication that the soul could hear. These messages, he said, help the spirit release any lingering attachment and step more confidently into the next stage of its journey. Now, I want to go even deeper into this topic, because exploring the emotional and energetic connection between the spirit and its former body, and how the living can consciously influence that release, reveals a dimension of the afterlife experience that is both profoundly human and unmistakably spiritual. Cayce believed that the smoothness of our passage into the afterlife is not left to chance. It can be shaped, even mastered, while we are still alive. Among the most powerful tools he spoke of were soul preparation practices, methods designed to gently separate awareness from the physical body, so that the moment of death feels familiar rather than shocking. Astral projection, for example, offers a taste of existence beyond the skin, allowing us to navigate reality without the anchor of flesh and bone. For those who've experienced this, death is not an abrupt leap into the unknown, but a natural continuation of a skill they've already explored. These practices are not merely exercises in curiosity, they are transformations of mindset. by learning to operate from the soul body, to think, feel, and perceive, without depending on the physical brain. We begin to loosen our attachment to the body as our soul identity. Meditation, lucid dreaming, intentional visualization, all of these can serve as gateways into that awareness. The more often we cross that threshold while alive, the less resistance we will feel when the final crossing comes. This preparation reshapes our relationship with the concept of death itself. Instead of something to fear, it becomes a threshold we have walked toward many times, each step bringing a sense of familiarity. And here lies the hidden truth that Cayce emphasized. Readiness turns the moment of departure into a celebration of expansion. The soul that has practiced this release doesn't cling or resist. It moves forward eagerly, with the same excitement one might feel before embarking on a long-awaited journey. For such a soul, death is not an erasure, it is an unfolding. Awareness doesn't shrink, it widens. The senses sharpen, the capacity for love deepens, and the boundaries of space and time dissolve into something fluid. The journey becomes an adventure in the truest sense, full of discovery, connection, and the joy of remembering capabilities long forgotten during physical life. Cayce described this as a liberation, not from life itself, but from the limitations that kept us from experiencing it fully. Behind the scenes, this kind of transition also changes what comes after. A prepared soul often steps immediately into higher realms of learning, bypassing the confusion or hesitation that can hold others back. They move into roles of guidance, creation, or exploration, without the weight of unresolved fear. And because they arrive in this expanded state, their ability to connect with both the living and the departed is heightened, allowing them to serve as bridges between worlds if they choose. Now, I want to go even deeper into this topic, because the idea of approaching death not as a final act, but as the most profound expansion of consciousness we will ever experience challenges everything we've been taught about the end of life, and invites us to rethink how we are living right now. If you've stayed with me all the way here, you probably feel the same sense of wonder I do when exploring these hidden layers of our journey. That's why I'd love for you to subscribe, so you don't miss the next time we dive into something that shifts how we see life, death, and everything in between. And if this resonated with you, leave a comment saying, "I'm with you until the end," so I know we walked this path together today. A like would also mean a lot. It's a simple way of keeping this conversation alive and growing. There's a video right here that complements this topic beautifully. Click and continue with me over there.